Alright, now I'm going to go through some helpful techniques for the exercises I just went over. That's just some ways to easily move those chords around. You're going to probably find at first, when you're shifting like through the very first exercise from fret 3 to fret 7, it's hard to keep both fingers in place and land where you're going for. Usually moving down the neck from a high fret to a low fret is a little bit tougher than moving upwards for some reason. So what I'm going to do, one thing that really helps is we got just two chords going on here. I'm going to, after I get started, I'm here on my 3rd fret ready to start. From there all I have to do is strum 4 times. So instead of just staring at my hand and waiting to the last minute to think about my change, I'm going to actually target my change. I'm going to just keep an eye on, just stare at the 7th fret basically and the 9th fret of the A string, that next change we want to move to. So that way I'm not waiting to the last minute, I'm not going to hesitate or actually miss the frets. I'm going to be more right on target that way. And once I get to 7 and 9, I'm going to start targeting back to 3 and 5. So that's going to avoid the chords coming together really choppy or not quite getting them on the spot. It's going to come across really clean. If I don't do that, it's really easy to, you'll hear like a break in between basically. It would be something like this. Instead, I want to be able to just snap right into those chords. Alright, so another technique that makes it a lot easier to move freely across the strings like this is I'm not going to keep squeezing down. I'm not going to keep pressure down like I'm holding the chord down when I go to make that movement. If I do that, I'm going to make a slide. And eventually you'll want to use slides, but you don't want to do them when they're not supposed to be there basically. If I hold down and I just slide my hand across the strings, keeping pressure on the frets, it's going to sound like this. And I'll get that slide. It makes it a little tougher trying to slide when you're first starting out with them. So we're going to use a technique that's kind of like hopping to the next fret. We're not actually going to let go of the strings to jump to make our change. We're going to just release some of the pressure of how we're holding the notes down. We're going to still make contact with the strings so we don't lose our chord altogether. And I'm going to play my four chords. From there, I'm going to, pretty much as soon as I start to move over, I'm just releasing some of the pressure. And I'm going to drop back down on the 7. So it's almost like a jumping motion. And you just kind of snap into it quickly that way. And you won't get those notes sliding in between. And that's going to make it much, much easier to move. Next we'll take a look at the second part of the exercise, which involves the string change. And there's a couple ways to do this. We can either both fingers just jump straight down and actually leave to the next, so it goes from E to A to D and just jumps right straight down. Sort of like if you're playing open chords and you're playing an E major chord and you jump straight down to an A minor. It's the same fingering, just dropping right down a string, so every finger has to come up to go to the next string. So that's one way to do it. Another way makes it a little bit easier, and that's to keep your first finger planted. Your index finger is going to stay planted on that 3rd fret. And now instead of always playing on our fingertips, our first finger is going to actually flatten out, like we do when you play a bar chord. I'm going to use the flat part of my finger, my index finger, to hold down the E and A string at the same time on the 3rd fret. So now what's going to happen is it's just my ring finger that's going to jump down to the D string to make the change. And it's back and forth like that. My first finger is just going to stay planted right there. Now both of these kind of have their pros and cons. Keeping the first finger planted, what happens then is when you're first getting used to the power chords, if you're first starting out, you're going to maybe find you have a hard time hitting the strings you want to play on. E and A isn't so bad since they're the top two. But when we're trying to play an A and D and not hit that E string, it can get in the way, and you will accidentally hit it at first. So what if we're holding down still on the 3rd fret of the E string and we accidentally include that E string, we're not going to do anything terrible that way. We're going to just add an octave to the chord. It's still a power chord. Because this power chord, starting on the 3rd fret of the A string, we're holding a C. And then our 5th note, the ring finger note on the 5th fret of the D string, it's playing a G. So if I add that 3rd fret in on the E string, on the low E string, I'm just adding a lower G. So it's just adding an octave. I'll play it without the E string, and now with. So you definitely hear a difference. But it's not going to be a note that doesn't belong in the chord. If you're playing in an open, or let's say we're holding on the 4th and 6th fret of the A and D string, and we accidentally hit that open E, it's not going to fit with those notes. So it's kind of a good like backup plan basically, so you're safe from accidentally overstrumming and hitting the E string. Alright, next, the final technique we'll start to get into for this part is muting the strings with your index finger. So that is going to help you avoid hearing the other strings that you don't want to hear in the chord. If we're playing on the E and A string, we don't want to hit the D, G, B, or high E strings. And when you're strumming, it takes a little while to get used to that. So what I'll do is I'm going to hold the chord like normal. We'll go to the 5th and 7th fret, 5 on E, 7 on A. And I'm on my fingertips right now, and what I'm going to do is let my index finger just kind of relax and lay flat across the strings. I'm not pushing down like a bar chord, I'm just resting it across the other strings. So now it's going to make a string mute. If I play on strings D, G, B, and E, that's all you hear now. It does make some sound, but the notes of the power chord are going to drown that out. So now I can strum all the way through and still just hear the E and A string. So that's a very helpful technique. When you're trying that out, just kind of at first maybe go one string at a time to make sure you're not accidentally pushing down on the D or G strings and getting a different chord. And that's going to be it for this section of the video. I'll do one more section on a little bit more advanced exercises on getting the power chord moved around and just different shapes to really get used to it and quick with it.